Yeah, so we're here in the Medical Design Innovations Laboratory. Right now we're in our wet lab space where a lot of the development takes place. Here we have our suite of 3D printers, which we use for rapid prototyping for the rapid device. I'll let Jacob talk a little bit more about how he's using these devices to create new concepts for the rapid device. Go ahead,
Great.
Jacob.
Yeah, so we have a couple 3D printers here. Formlabs Form 4, it's SLM printing, and then we have Bamboo Labs X1 Carbon. Essentially, this is resin-based printing, uses a wide variety of materials, but essentially it just prints layers by flashing light onto the resin of the print plate. And from there, this is the Bamboo Labs X1 Carbon, filament based, uses specific PLAs or different types of materials, using spools to be able to actually get that material printed layer by layer. And the way we kind of use them is we are developing molds to be able to pour materials into these molds to then get the desired outcome or the shapes that we're trying to make for the rapid device. They're both very fast printers, which is great because then that just makes prototyping and quick, rapid changes to the design quick and easy, which has been very useful throughout the iterations of the design.
Yeah, we're moving on to some of the space we use for our rapid development for the device. That's the lab bench over there. You know, in this room, we typically will use this space for any work that needs to have more PPE, so if you need to protect yourself more, if you're trying to do work that involves maybe animal tissues, if we're testing some early prototypes to see if it conforms well to the trachea, this is where we would use that space for, okay? So this is more of your traditional lab space. Jacob, I'll let you highlight some of the technologies you have for the rapid device over there as we move.
Rapid as an overall concept, just bare bones overview of why it's needed and why it's important. So, endotracheal intubation is a very common issue, whether it's in a pre-hospital, in-hospital setting. In-hospital, over about 13 to 20 million intubations occur annually in the US alone. But it's a pretty difficult procedure, especially when you're not in a hospital. So in a pre-hospital setting, combat setting, or anything of that nature, trying to get a tube like this into the airway isn't just a trivial task. Even as we're all standing here, right here, our airways don't necessarily align. Like if I'm standing right here, my mouth directional axis is kind of going this way, but our trachea is completely perpendicular to that, right? And we're trying to use a tube C-shaped structure to be able to get into the tube, or into the trachea, I should say. Then from there, it's not like a perfect C. It's more of like a sinusoidal S type shape, and this isn't that. So a lot of the times, pre-hospital providers or EMTs, or whoever may be using like a stylet or a bougie, which is almost like a pencil-like structure that just gives shape to the device. So they'll essentially kind of do something like this, which they'll just send in the stylet here, kind of give it shape, almost like a J type shape, so that way they can almost get it into the airway properly. But even then, visualization is difficult, and it's difficult to be able to actually see where you're going. So what we're trying to develop is something that is a bit more pliable, something that is that still similar shapes, that way end users can still know what they're using and know training on it, but have more control. You're able to kind of steer, or having something that is, able to get into that airway a little easier. So that's the ultimate goal with the rapid device, and I'll kind of hand it back to you to see if there's anything else.
No, thank you so much for that great description, Jacob. I'll add on by saying that, in a hospital environment where it's really controlled with practitioners with years of experience with intubation, the procedure can be fairly routine, okay? But if you're on the battlefield, if you're an EMT provider, it's not so simple, right? You might not be at the right angle to intubate. There might be other materials in the airway, such as blood, vomit, dirt. I know it can be kind of gross, but this is the reality, okay? So placing an airway correctly every single time can be a real challenge. So that's what our lab is trying to tackle right now. The robotic element has to do with controlling the different channels, okay? I'll let Jacob talk a little bit more here, but basically instead of having one cuff, we have different channels that allow it to move.
Sure.
The control system hasn't been developed yet in the lab. That's the follow-on portion of that, but we're having this basically form factor allows us to move it from a distal end, basically from the user end, versus having to move the tube with your hand and try to guess where the airway is, basically. That's the robotic aspect of it. But it's a little more downstream to answer your question.
Right. So like, for example, if I were to like inflate this end, I'm able to move that distally, right? So the center line of the tube changes, right? So, and then as I depressurize it, the center line of the tube changes as well. Notice how the center point of the tube is still the main body of the tube, right? So that once you get the tube in there, there's still that ventilation aspect, right? You're still making sure that you can get oxygen ventilation down to the patient, even if you can't see where you're going, right? So we're able to kind of change the trajectory of where the tube goes, because right now the current trajectory is just this C-type shape, right? So what if the airway isn't this perfect, like just line of sight, right? If we need to do that adjustment, that curvature change, can you change the direction of it to be able to get there? So that's kind of the idea behind it.
And we're so thankful for TRC4 to be able to give us that startup funding to be able to get this off the ground, right? This is a technology that has been in our heads for a couple years now, but now that we have the funding, we can bring it to life with great graduate students like Jacob, who are working in the lab every day to bring it to reality, okay? With his team of undergraduate students, with fellow graduate students, this is something that is becoming a reality and is going to go touch patients, I think, very soon. Not trying to ignore you, Rakib. Yeah, so another one of our great PhD students, he's working on another really crucial aspect of airway management, right? So we have endotracheal tubes for intubating the patient. There's also something called suction devices. Basically, if you have that dirt or that vomit, how do you get it out before you intubate? And Rakib is working on some fundamental understanding of how do we improve these suction devices, whether they're kind of manually powered or electrically powered. He's working on simulation work and suction device work to see if, well, can we improve them? A lot of these suction devices were just kind of put together a number of decades ago, and they haven't really been improved since. We're trying to see how can we improve that suction efficiency. I'll let you talk more about it, Rakib, you're the expert.
I'm Rakib Hassan. I'm a third year mechanical engineering PhD student, and I'm working with NBI lab from the very beginning of my PhDs. Okay, if you talk about suction, we basically use the negative pressure. So negative pressure depends on the atmospheric pressure. So suction equipment is pretty simple. You need a vacuum pump, you need a canister that you can create vacuum, and you need endotracheal tube so that you can remove that stinky materials like blood, vomit from the airway, right? And these are very time sensitive things and geometric sensitive applications. That what I mean is, like, when you are in the Earth atmosphere, it's very easy to predict the things. When you have higher altitude, suppose in the military helicopter, your prediction of the suction performance is not defined because it depends on that atmospheric pressure. So that's why we are trying to dig down, like, okay, current market, we have suction devices that are very powerful, very effective in the hospital settings, but in the outer worlds, like in the battlefield, in the side of the highway, or in the higher altitude in the helicopter, like, is that suction device are working well? So that's what I'm trying to investigate.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rakib. As you can see, Jacob's team for the Rapid isn't working in a vacuum, right? We have folks working on suction devices, which are so related to that intubation procedure. And as Rakib just told you, a lot of the suction devices are either not powerful enough or they're too bulky. And so folks just aren't carrying them, especially in the pre-hospital environment. So our lab's working to change that. And again, it's a related but not the same project. Yeah, so here we are in our other lab space. This is the space where we do a lot of our technological development of our suction devices. Here we have a suite of about 3 different suction devices that our lab works on. Anything from really small, ultra portable devices to larger, more field hospital type devices. One thing we noted over in the other lab space is that current suction devices, they're typically either very bulky, as is the case with certain suction devices here for field hospital use, or they're just not powerful enough. And so our lab is taking a refreshed view at that and saying, how can we improve them in some way? I'll hand you here, this is one of the current, for field hospital use suction devices. It's fairly bulky. You wouldn't necessarily want to take that with you in a portable sense. And so I think a lot of this started with even a senior design project and saying, how can we improve suction devices? And so that's why our lab developed this one here. It's called the BRISC, the Battlefield Ready Innovation Suction Kit. Some of the major innovations with this device include the fact that it has a built-in canister, so you don't need a separate suction canister in addition to your device. It also works in whatever orientation that you place it. So if it gets kicked over on the battlefield, if it's upside down, it still provides that suction, which isn't a capability for a lot of these current suction devices, okay?
The utility of having it be orientation independent is super useful for even in like transportation. If you can just hang something like this on the side of a cart or like in a ambulance or something of that nature, it doesn't matter where it sits, as long as you're getting that suction that you need for the patient, which is very useful.
Yeah. And so this was presented to a number of end users, and we got some feedback from the Air Force who said, great, can you make it a little bit bigger for field hospital use? Fair enough. So that's why our lab developed this other device called Scram. You can see some of the innards here on the right-hand side. The novelty of this device is that it has 3 separate suction lines. So you could have multiple patients, multiple different types of injuries, where you can have a high pressure oropharyngeal suction, as well as some other lower pressure, perhaps wound vacuum lines, okay?
Cranks on right away. Immediately you get the suction that you need. Adjustable suction lines for each of them. Has a pretty decent user interface to be able to change the amount of suction that you're getting provided at the distal end. And from there, additionally, much lighter in comparison to the other one. And I'll just kind of hand this to you just so you can kind of get a feel. Much lighter with the additional add of the 3 suction lines. Really cool, kind of fits the form factor to what is currently used in the field or in a setting that you would see those in. Jacob Provencio. I'm a 3rd-year PhD student here at UTSA UT Health. Yeah, I've been with the MDI lab for about 3-4 years now, because I joined when I was a senior mechanical engineer at UTSA as well. So I joined as a senior when I was in my undergraduate, fell in love with research, and kind of stuck around still here.